What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I am very excited with my next guest because this guy has done some pretty incredible things in the marketing game, in the talent recruitment game. He's done over $200 million in sales for himself and his clients, has 2 successful exits. This is going to be a lot of fun. My guest today is Phil Rivers. Phil, what's going on, man?
What's good?
How are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Phil and I had a chat beforehand and we instantly vibed. I think we think very similar. So it's going to be a fun conversation. Phil, for those who don't know you, let's hear your not so humble bragging rights. What have you been able to do for your clients? What have you been able to do for yourself? What would your mom say about you if she had to brag to people about your success?
I don't know if my mom would stop talking. You know how it goes. But I would say not so humble bragging rights. I don't know, 450 plus clients, 200. I just stopped counting how much revenue what we contributed to them. So 200 is where I was like, all right, now it's just like too hard to keep track of, but 200 million in sales plus. And honestly, man, the thing I'm most proud of is just like cracking the nut for client acquisition for the agency. I feel like that's the hardest, the one thing that most people have a very difficult time doing, but I couldn't have done all of those things, have that many clients or drive those numbers of sales if I wasn't good at acquiring clients on the front end. I wouldn't have had that many clients if I wasn't good at client acquisition. So the marketing side and the sales side of it. So I think that's what I would say least humble about is I fucking cracked the code on that shit.
We're going to dive into that because it is one of the hardest things that people, especially in the agency game, agencies and marketing in general has become so commoditized that it's hard to stand out. It's hard to figure out how do I get clients consistently. We'll dive into that. But first, let's talk about the journey a little bit. You obviously didn't start with $200 million in generated sales. You didn't figure out how to get there. How did you even start? What does that look like? Let's take it back a little bit.
Yeah, dude. So at the time, I started in e-com in 2008 or so. Oh, no, even before 2005, I started selling t-shirts on message boards that coincided with the releases of Nike Dunks. So like super obscure. But back then, all you could really do was build an email list. There was no Facebook ads. Facebook just came out at the time. You could maybe do PPC, but I just built a small list, would communicate with the list when Dunks dropped and we had a tee that coincided with the drop and just learn from there. And then ultimately made that into a brand, got that into 20 stores throughout California. But this is still like very web 1.0, grinding with a cardboard box, taking shirts to stores type of a thing. It was not very internet-y at the time. And then graduated, that was during college, graduated college, again, my second job, and I'm working at a software company in the loyalty space. And I was just like, I needed a side hustle. So I just started doing marketing stuff. So some web design, some ads, some email, but I was like a jack of all trades, master of none, and it's hard to sell that. Right. And then I was like, fuck, I need to pick one thing. And what I had the most confidence in being able to sell and fulfill at the time was email, because I had known it most intimately because I had been doing it for so long, maybe 10 years at that point. And so I just started to sell it. And then it became very clear that, once you have 3 or 4, more than 5 clients, it's okay, this requires more than just me, either on the fulfillment side. And if I want any more clients, I have to figure out the marketing and the sales piece, which at the time wasn't anything I'd ever done really for myself. And going into it, I was like, I was tired of having a boss. And so I was like, I just want 4 or 5 clients. I don't have to deal with any of the BS, but I also don't have the overhead of a team. But then once I got to 5, 6 clients, whatever it was, I was like, oh man, like this is hard solo, right? I just bought myself a job. I have 5 bosses instead of 1. And so then I started to all right, I joined a mastermind, Traffic and Funnels at the time. And it just changed my whole perspective on stuff. Like I didn't know what I didn't know, but I knew that someone else had the answers. Let me just pay for the carpool lane to get them.
Who was that? Taylor Welsh and Evans, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I still attribute sales today to that program. I'm still ROIing on that purchase, if you will. That's how I think about it. But I joined that and just changed my whole perspective on stuff. Then I really got an education and this is how to think about backing out of fulfillment. This is how to approach marketing yourself and sales. And then once I made that commitment and joined that program, at the time I never spent that amount of money on anything before, and it was like 10 G's. I was like, fuck. I was like so scared. And anyways, obviously it worked out, but that really opened my eyes to this could be much more than just me with 5 clients.
So let's talk about how you started to first on the delivery side, because obviously before you can even start the acquisition side, I made the wrong mistake. I didn't fix the delivery, and I figured out how to do the acquisition. So I went all in, like full on, let's just acquire more customers, and that became a shit show.
Then it's Churn City.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was just nightmare. But I assume you figured out the delivery side, because if you're at 500 plus clients, or you over the course of your agency career, you've had 500 clients, you must have figured out that side. So how did you go about figuring that out?
I was a lot of just like trial and error because I never really hired anyone before that. So at the time, I was just like, all right, I just need to get out of fulfillment. And the easiest thing for me to get out of was like the designing of the emails and like loading them into the tool. That was like the lowest common denominator of stuff that had to be done, that there's minimal risk if anything gets messed up. Whereas I wasn't ready to like to get to outsource, if you will, the strategic side, like my IP, how I would approach it. I wasn't ready to do that yet. So I found someone that I could hand that stuff off to, and it would be done reasonably well, and good turnaround time, good work, all that stuff. And just gave them slack, but made sure that they did it what they were supposed to do. And essentially have them show me that they were responsible enough for me to give them more and train them up on like the strategic side, how to approach it. And then that was the next thing I gave them. And then ultimately gave them the interface with the clients as well. So like little by little, backed my way out of fulfilling for clients. Then I was like, all right, once I was there, I was like, oh, it's a breath of fresh air. But I was like, now I can actually sharpen my sword and get after it on the acquisition side.
So what did you do for your clients? Were you just focused on email machines and text messaging? Was text messaging even a thing at the time, or was it most?
Not as much in the early days. This is 2019. Like it was there, but not really. So predominantly email. So we would run everything end to end, from the strategic side of it, copy, design, implementing it, testing it, keeping track of the performance, reporting, analysis that changes strategy the subsequent months, and then communicating all of that to the client. And there are some clients, like bigger brands in particular, bigger companies, they have certain resources internally. For example, they have design locked up, so they don't need help. They just need help with strategy or copy, for example. So it's all email. And then the way I thought about it was like some orgs are more buttoned up in others in other departments. And so it's just like, where are they weak or where do they need help? And we just slot in to plug those gaps for them. So it was pretty malleable, I guess you could say. But the overwhelming majority, we just ran email as a channel for them end to end.
Interesting. And how did you, because email, if you think about the digital marketing world now, like it's very commoditized, right? I can go on Upwork and I can find copywriters. I can go on Udemy and take a course on copywriting. Now, of course, with ChatGPT, people can crank out emails through that. How did you build an acquisition engine to get clients for something that is very unknown for most business owners, right? Like they're not sitting there and being like, oh, I want an email person or an email engine. So talk to me about the engine that you built to solve your acquisition problem.
Yeah, man. So if you think about the market broadly, like starting with Upwork or doing it yourself, ChatGPT, or olden days, just running it yourself before ChatGPT existed, I feel like there's always an appetite for each of these pockets of the market. Like for the DIY type of a person, they're not spread so thin where it's like, oh shit, I can't do this, or they enjoy it, but they haven't gotten to the point where, oh, I need an agent, I need an expert to do this for me. Even if people try and go what I'll call like the cheaper route, which is the Upwork side of it, they're really like, it's not that there aren't good people there, but most of them, they don't have the amount of exposure to accounts or data points, and they're oftentimes less experienced and less reliable because they're just like a one-man show. And a lot of people do start there, but then they realize, what's the saying, man? If you buy cheap, it ends up being more expensive. And so I think there's a place for all of them. I think it just comes down to what's the sophistication level of the underlying business and how do they look at return or how they invest in this channel. But it's similar for Meta even. But on the acquisition side, I tried a bunch of different stuff. As man, there's seasons that all of like certain things work, like it's webinars and it's short form VSLs and it's lead magnets, and everything goes in cycles. And so when I first started, like I started with lead magnets, got nowhere, but I also like was super afraid to put my face in the ads at the time. I was like super sussed out about it. And then I was like, dude, this is the one thing I'm not doing is putting my face in the ad. And I vividly remember there was this one ad, this is, I think 2019. I audited an email account in the ad, like on a Loom. And I was like, I like to think I was one of the first people to do that because I hadn't seen it anywhere else, but that ad just took off, bro. And it was that and a short form VSL that they opted in for, maybe 8 minutes with book a call. It's like very straightforward, simple book a call funnel. But then this like really started to work. I was like, holy smoke. So like the creative unit was good and unique at the time. And also I put my face in the ad. And I think I was just very well spoken and broke down what I saw on the screen. And then literally the whole business just changed with that ad. And I wrote that ad for probably 18 months.
Yeah, it's funny. I did the exact same thing, except I didn't solve the delivery side first. But I tell this story a lot because it's how it changed everything for us. I tried all sorts of stuff like webinars. We tried lead magnets. None of that stuff worked because if you think about it, if somebody's looking for a done for you service, they don't want to learn. They're not going to sit through a 60-minute webinar. They have no desire to do that. They don't even want to download your stupid PDF at the end of the day because who cares? I want to know, can you solve my problem? Do you have any proof that you can solve my problem? And like, where do I sign up? What are the next steps? That's really all you need to explain to them. So I did the exact same thing. I had an ad that went to a VSL that was about 8 minutes long, just talked about that and then book a call. And our calendar just went like crazy. And then I was like, all right, let's sell all these people. And then they're like, yeah, you're why am I being onboarded 3 months out? And we're like, oh shit. All right, let me fix that problem. Let me turn this thing off.
On every level, it reveals inefficiencies or issues that aren't buttoned up. That's just like the nature of the game and the nature of growing. Like even if you fix the fulfillment side, there would have been fulfillment cracks. Someone drops the ball or they're irresponsible or don't communicate or they fucking ghost. Who knows? There's always some bullshit.
There's always something. So let's talk about the actual service that you deliver. Like let's turn it into a little bit of a playbook in terms of how you do email marketing, how you think about this. How are you generating so much value and so much revenue for your clients? Are you only working with clients who already have large email lists and you just come in and figure out how to better communicate to that list? Are you like, what does that look like? And then also, how do you approach email that is different than me just going into ChatGPT and saying, hey, I need to put together a promo for this thing?
So in terms of the overarching approach, like the way that I think about the modality is we're just communicating with humans fundamentally, whether they're a B2B buyer or a B2C buyer, right? And so it's just a modality to communicate with people that have raised their hand and said, I'm interested in whatever you talk about or whatever you sell, right? And so some businesses are farther along with their list, whether it be the size or their frequency of communication or their strategy. But nonetheless, there's only been, I've probably audited maybe 3,000 accounts over the years. And there's only been one account that I looked at and was like, everything is perfect. You don't I can't help you at all. And there were accounts that were pretty good sometimes. Were like, don't switch agencies. They're doing everything right. Stay. But there was one that was like, I can't find one thing to tell you, do this better out of 3,000. Right. But I think most businesses, whether they're selling B2C or B2B, they're not really thinking about it as like a performance channel. And so as a result of that, it gets like table stakes from a time, energy, investment, resources standpoint. And they're like, oh, and they look at it like box checking. Are we sending campaigns? Check. Do we have automations on? It's binary. Yes. Is it like the way they look at it is binary? Yes or no? Check. And they never think, are we getting leads? Check. But they're never looking one layer deeper to be like, okay, what's the story that the metrics are telling us in terms of what's performing and what isn't performing well and or what's missing. So oftentimes what I see is this could be companies that are doing multiple $1 million a month. This could be companies that are doing $50,000 a month. I see the same patterns across all of them. And it's like, fundamentally, they're asleep at the wheel when it comes to like their lead gen. Like they don't have benchmarks or KPIs. Oftentimes they're just not clipping as many leads as they should be from the traffic they're already paying for with time or money. And then like with the automations, there's either always like holes in the customer lifecycle that don't have an automation to plug the hole, right? For example, with e-com, it could be like abandoned cart is a common one. I'll use that as an example, right? But they might not have that there at all. Or even if it's like a B2B thing, selling service, like they don't have any emails for people that start to book a call but don't complete it. That's a very common stage, but that's a very high leverage stage. And even if it is there, they're not looking at the metrics to be like, is this performing or isn't it? And what do we do when it's not there? Again, it's just, is it there? Yes or no? And they never think about it for 3 years. And the campaign side of it, to your point with the ChatGPT, it's not, in my opinion, it's not really about getting the words from ChatGPT, even though what they give you will probably be not the best from a copywriting standpoint. But that's neither here nor there. I think more so what people lack is like the strategic thinking around what is the campaign strategy overall? What outcomes are we trying to manufacture? What campaigns help us manufacture that outcome, and who should these campaigns be sent to? That's that's the lion's share of it. Not to diminish it, but the copy is important, increasingly more so if it's B2B than a B2C, because there's more copy necessary and design. But really, a lot of times the people's strategy is just like super half baked. I think they treat it this way because it's like they don't look at it as performance channel. They don't realize that significant portion of their conversions, whatever that means for them, calls, sales in the cart or what have you, should come from here.
Yeah, email is by far it's still by far the biggest channel for you to generate consistent, predictable revenue through a follow-up mechanism. At the end of the day, same thing with text, although I don't have as much experience on the text side. Everybody talks about traffic. Everybody talks about turning traffic into customers, but really it's what happens in the middle that really turns that traffic into customers, and people forget that's what you need to be focused on.
Yeah, dude. Like one thing too, like everyone always says I need more traffic, but what they neglect to realize is like the traffic that they're getting doesn't convert at 100% ever. And so then but if you look at how humans interact on the internet and how they buy stuff, again, whether they're buying something low ticket or high ticket, B2B, B2C, the people that opt in and that opt in, those people tend to convert 3 to 5 times better than the people that you're just driving, that are just coming from ads or traffic organically anyways. And so it just like behooves you to do it.
And now you've shifted a lot in terms of you got your agency was acquired and you've moved on from that. And now you focus a lot more on talent acquisition, right? So you help small businesses in the US find kind of nearshore marketing and support without necessarily having to pay these crazy fees. So how did you quickly, as we wrap up, how did you transition into that? And what's your mission and your vision for that? Yeah,
dude. So I would say I sold the agency, rolled some of the equity in. That agency that I rolled equity in sold. And then this was like, I don't know, very beginning of this year. Then I was like, one thing I got good at is sourcing talent for the team. And I was like, most people don't use a recruiter. They don't even think of it, especially like agencies and brands. And it's like such a hack because hiring is just eats your soul. So that's one thing. That's ultimately what one of the next businesses became, and just eating the shit for clients so they don't have to go through evaluating 1 to 300 resumes and running the whole process themselves, and trying to do it in a very cost effective way for them. And then I would say maybe 2 months ago or so, I just started getting demand again for email stuff just because I've been in the game so long. And then I was like, I had been out for a while, admittedly, and I was like, fuck, I miss it. So like I still do email stuff more, but I'm in a much more boutique environment than I did before when I was trying to run it up.
Cool. That's exciting. So you got 2 things going on the go, but one's a little bit more boutique. Tell me, as we wrap up here, we always like to summarize the show, or not summarize, but at least wrap up with what is your number one best growth tactic? As marketers, we love, shiny objects just like everybody else, right? So what is the shiny tactic that you're like, you know what, if I could do this every time, I know it works, it makes money, it helps businesses grow.
Yeah, dude. So I'll call this like a fundamental hack. And I feel like a lot of people ignore the fundamentals a lot, but this is something that anyone can get value from. One thing that I recognize is most people don't pay attention to how effective they capture intent from the traffic they're already paying for. And they don't have any benchmarks or KPIs. So because of that, they convert a fraction of what they should be. So this is a 2-part fundamental hack. Part number 1 is understand what you should be converting from an opt-in standpoint from your traffic. So for like ecom, for example, my KPIs are at least 5% of the traffic should opt in, with the goal of finding an offer where 10% or more opt in, which is rare. Usually people live between the 5 and 10% range, but then knowing what to do based on those KPIs. For info, it's like baseline 20%, with the goal of finding an offer that converts 30% plus, ideally 40. But if you check those every week, then you can actually pull the leverage you need to manufacture the throughput. That's number 1. And even if nothing changes downstream, everything else is still broken, you'll sell at more units, whatever you sell, just because you have more efficient throughput from a lead gen standpoint. That's number 1. Number 2 is I found that most people, if they're going to buy within 2 weeks of opting in, there's the recency plays a huge factor, right? And so what most people do in terms of how they nurture people post opt-in is they're very laissez-faire. They send an email here, wait a few days, send an email there. But every day that goes by, the likelihood that person will convert decays substantially. So a fundamental hack number 2 is just be very aggressive and within especially the initial 14 days post opt-in, driving to the conversion mechanism that you're looking to drive for the business, selling in the cart if you're selling consumer products, booking a call if you're selling services. But that initial 14 days is so crucial because if you're not aggressive, one of your competitors is, and they're going to buy from them instead.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do this analytics just even on the software side, right? It's this 14-day, whether it's a free trial, credit card, no credit card, it's that 14-day window that how can you get the value across so that they're willing to pull the trigger. And after that 14 days, it becomes almost impossible because they're moved on.
They're out of pocket or they found another solution.
Exactly. Man, Phil, this was super insightful and exciting. We could talk, I'm sure, for another 30, 40 plus minutes about all sorts of stuff, but we like to keep these shows quick and straight to the point. And you've delivered a lot of value here. So where can people learn more about you?
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had a good time too, bro. It's too short. Find me on Twitter at the Phil Rivers, LinkedIn, same thing. And on the internet, hit me up at growthpointe with an E.io, growthpointe.io.
Oh, yes, on the internets, that thing out there that if you want to find. All right, man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch.
Thanks for having me, Doug.